Irrigation system for the water that is here comes out of Clear Creek. So there's a dam, a 14-foot by 135-foot dam called the Kendrick Dam, and then there's a canal called the Kendrick Canal, which comes around and feeds the Clear Creek water to these irrigation systems, and it was built by the Kendrick family in 1910. Buildings down here in 1923 to 1925, and the Huseman family that was in Sheridan came out here and built all these buildings, plus the LX Bar buildings, which is 10 miles to the north in 1910. This is the Kendrick Canal right here, and like I said, it comes from Kendrick Dam 7 miles back up on the Clear Creek side of the divide. This first house here is a newer house where the ranch foreman and his family lived, Kelby Kretschmann. And then we have our shop buildings, grain storage, the old original Quonset hut that the Kendricks had here, and the Kendricks had the open shed machine shop over on the left here. Now you can see we're coming into the buildings, and the first building on the left is the horse barn. And we'll have a chance to look at these buildings, and I'll tell you kind of what's in them. And 1923 to 1925.
Spend a little bit more time here. Steve's going to tour us around and talk about the different buildings, and there are restroom facilities, so if there's that, we can do that right away. And then after the tour, I guess we'll just grab our lunches and feel free to spread out, and we'll probably be here about an hour or so.
And then they went broke over there, and they came over here. And then Kendrick worked. He was over there at the OW and bought it from, as Billy alluded to, the Converse Cattle Company.
Yeah.
And then the winter of '85, he worked for him first. And then the winter of '85 and '86, after that, then he bought the Converse Cattle Company out. And he was lucky because the cattle from the Converse Cattle Company drifted off Hanging Woman Creek into the Little Remington and Big Remington drainages, which was really rough, and Squaw Creek over down to the north. And on the right hand side you can see the tops of the rough hills. The cattle drifted into there and they could winter the storm better. And then he bought the remnants of the Converse Cattle Company.
It's quite a bit on cowboy wages.
He did not homestead. Billy and I talked about this yesterday. You said that this was homesteaded by somebody by the name of Smith.
Yes.
And I don't know who homesteaded a lot of this ground around here. One of the first purchases that I know about that Kendrick had is over here on Clear Creek. He purchased the William Stubbs place. And from there he started to buy these places and pick them up. The Cresswell family was on the east side of the river, and John Kendrick said he'd stay on the west side river. And there's two homestead cabins. This is the mouth of Spotted Horse Creek right here. And there's an old cabin there that was built by Cresswells, and then the Jim Gibbs place up the road across the river, that old house was built by Cresswells. And they, if anybody knows the Cresswells in Sheridan, well, I believe it was their great-granddads that were brothers that first came to this country. But the Von Cresswell family was the only ones that stayed. This area down here where the feedlot and the buildings were, Kendrick called the Berries. And I have no idea where that name came from. And that's where the house was. Then in 1923, when if you've read a lot of history, well, in 1923 the flood came through here, so the house was taken at the flood, and I have no idea where the house was at down there. There's an old log barn, but I don't know how long it's been there either. So then Mr. Kendrick after the flood of 1923, he got the Oscar Huseman family to come up here. They built the LX Bar buildings in 1910, and then they started by looking at the cornerstone in this building. They finished in 1925. And this was the main house. And this is supposed to be, if I remember rightly, and somebody correct me, Spanish architecture. As you can see on the arches on this building here. The stone structure to the north over here, that was the root cellar. And all of the back of it was in bad shape, so we took that off, filled the steps up, and we use it for storage. This building right here, this small building, was the spring house, and there was an artesian well came into that, and they kept that to keep the house now. Now, when the Kendrick Ranch sold, Giles W. Pritchard Gordon from Sussex, England, bought this place. This was the last parcel to be sold. They wanted to sell it to all the neighbors, and no one wanted this because they didn't want the irrigation and the work. And so he bought it, and he took over the 15th of March of 1989, I think that's correct. And my wife Kay and I moved down here April 8th of 89 and moved into this house. And so we started to, then I think in about 1991, Mr. Pritchard Gordon did a remodel on this building, the spring house, which is now guest house. The next long building that runs this way, in the east end of it, was a smokehouse. The middle section was an ice house, and the west end section was a generator room. I see some people taking notes, so do you want me to slow down? And of course, the bell tower sits in the middle. The first building on the left when we came in was the bunkhouse. And the hooks were in the wall for the bunkhouse. They had bunk beds just like you'd have in a prison in there. And then that has been made into a living quarters now. But the outside of all these buildings, except for a couple of windows on the top of this house, is exactly like Kendrick had the Huseman's rebuild it. Then the big building I said was the carriage house, the blacksmith shop, and the horse barn, and a dairy barn in this other building over here. And if somebody wants to go over there and wander around, we can look through it too. I mentioned that the kitchen here has not been changed. It was the same as when we came here in '89 and the Kendrick family had it. They would employ about 12 to 15 people here, and they'd eat here every day, and cowboy out of here, and plus they raised a lot of corn, and they had the feedlot here to take their weaned calves and overwinter through the winter and then sell or go back to grass or whatever. The Yellowstone in these buildings, which is random, came across the river off the Rowley Ranch. And the red stone came down here in what we call Red Well, that the county road goes right over the top, going to the LX Bar. It was quarried there and brought up here and put together. I think I might have mentioned that from 1923 to 1925 is when Huseman's built this building. And as you can see, I don't know whether you can see or not, but you can see that the walls are about 2 feet thick, and they've got rubble. All the rubble and stuff is thrown in the middle of the 2 walls. Then there's a full basement under this house too. All the lumber for this house came to the Arvada lumber yard, and there's a board down here stamped Kendrick Cattle Company, Arvada Lumber Company, Arvada, Wyoming. came in on the railroad. Anybody, I'm sure, one gentleman asked me how much this place encompasses now. Mr. Pritchard Gordon bought 16,000 acres from the Kendrick Cattle Company, and now it's about 30,000 acres of state, federal, and private. The Kendricks retained all the minerals under this, and there's about 7,000 acres of Kendrick's minerals. Then there's state minerals, federal minerals, and then there's, I don't know how many homesteads was on this place. When you go out a horseback or around, there's homesteads all over. Buffalo Creek, Squaw Creek, all of those places had homesteads on them. This piece of ground over here, this 5,000 acres, has been added on as recently as 2 years ago. The Woods place up here, some people may remember some people in Sheridan by the name of Larry and Merle Woods, and they were piano, I think she played a piano, and I'm not sure, they homesteaded that Woods pasture up there, and then they sold that in about '92, they acquired that. So anyhow, this goes from, it starts right up here at the corner and goes 17 miles to the Montana line and gets as narrow as 1/4 mile wide in a couple of spots.
Is it attached to the LX bar?
No, it is not, Mark.
Okay.
No.
And the LX bar is the piece that the state just acquired?
That is owned by Mr. Gurgio, yes, the LX bar is. Now it's the LX bar buildings on the west side of the river that Mr. Gurgio owns. And PG Ranch has the east side of the river, which is the LX bar meadows at the mouth of LX bar Creek. And that old set of buildings there was originally the Lytton place. They called it Kendricks called it the Lytton place. And it has a good water right there, and there's 400 acres of native hay ground there. But we own PG Ranch owns right up to the middle of Powder River, across from the LX bar buildings.
And so where is the OW in relation to this? And when did the Kendricks also live at the OW?
That was their headquarters.
And this was not?
This was not, no. Now there's a bedroom here that they called the senator's room. When he'd come here, he'd stay there. But they didn't live permanently because I think as Billy said that they moved to Sheridan in 1910 when Manville and them were young.
Okay.
So Kendricks themselves, now Tom Kendrick lived here.
He was a brother?
No.
No.
And you know, I can't tell you exactly how Tom Kendrick, I think Tom Kendrick may have been, Billy, do you know?
He got into some trouble.
No, I said, how is he related to John B?
Oh, they were, it's cousins, I think, fathers.
And of course, Tom Kendrick was the father of Lucille White, Tommy White's mother. If you know, ever heard of her. Tommy White and his dad had White Trucking in Sheridan, and they were there for years and years and years. And Lucille homesteaded over here on Clear Creek, which is now owned, we talked about Dixie Reese. She owned Lucille Kendrick's homestead and stuff over here, which is not part of this ranch.
So the portion that Gurgio just gave to the state,
Yes.
where is that in relation to where we are standing now?
10 miles down the road and across the river on the left-hand side of the road and across Powder River. And
But we are across Powder River. Oh, are we on the east side right now?
we're on the west side of
Oh.
Powder River. Then
Okay.
you're going right down here, you'll cross Powder River on the Powder River Bridge.
Okay.
And the river will be on the west side of the road. when Mr. Kendrick built the LX Bar buildings, he thought the county road was going to go down the west side of the river all the way. Well, the county, he must not have had enough pull or whatever, but it didn't go down there. The old original wagon road did go up the west side of Powder River from Miles City to Buffalo, but then they cut across and they didn't stay on the west side of the river. So then his buildings were isolated.
here?
Yep. An old 18-something map shows some kind of a wagon road that came from Miles City, and it stayed on the west side of the river and went on up and then went by Arvada and went on into Buffalo, up Crazy Woman. And there's a bunch of rocks down here, and they have, I can't remember how far back in the 1800s people have put their names on that.
That'll be next year's tour.
The names are still there?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. One thing about it, there's sandstone rocks all over this country with people's names carved in them.
Really?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what's the quarry process for this rock? How did they? Was there a saw that they used to cut those blocks, or how was that done?
Well, you know, I'm really not versed on that. But you can see where they drilled holes to, you know, to break the rock and stuff off, and then of course they went ahead and cut it. You can see it's in the blacksmith shop and the carpenter shop. This is the whole stuff, and then this was all concrete originally, and then some of these tie stalls, we put these stumps in here for a floor. And you can see by looking, you can see at one time how many you can see where the hail has beaten on it through the years. The dents in the top of the roof, and get some pretty good hailstorms through here. That room and this room are both saddle rooms. Buildings that is there, right there, to hold the stone up while the mortar's set up.
How big are these pieces?
2 feet. Tie stall. And of course, the horses will trumpet so bad, so if you just put the stumps in there, well, it'll stand the shoes and the hoofs of the horses of tramping so bad. And then this
Anytime you go across the Powder River, you have to go, ah, Powder River, Letterbuck. And so we're ready to cross the river, and I want to hear everybody. So as we go across, it's aha, Powder River, Letterbuck. Okay, are we ready? Here we go. Ah, Powder River, Letterbuck. There's a fascinating story that goes with that saying, and maybe on the way back back, I'll have time to tell you about it, but I found this, I don't know, it's